Hey guys, Miss Spanky here, and so this week for our math lesson, we're going to continue to work on graphing. So last week we did a graph on Earth Day for an Earth Day activity, but this week we're going to do a graphing activity that is related to our News to You story, and it's titled Sharing Happiness. So we're going to do some sharing happiness graphing. The document is on the S'more page. The link will direct you to my Google Drive, and you can print all of the pictures. The worksheets will look a little different than it will on the video, but it's all the same information that you can use with your kiddo, excuse me, to be able to complete this activity. All right. So this is what our graph looks like. And so here at the bottom, we have our pictures, what we're looking to graph, and on the side we have our numbers. So that will be our count. So the directions on our graph say count the number of times each word appears in this week's news pages. So we already read the News to You story, and I already collected all of that data. And so the second direction says starting at the bottom of each column, fill in the squares to match that number. So last week, I linked a video, a Brain Pop Junior video that discusses different bar graphs and tally charts. So you can do this however you want. I will be using this as a pictograph, and you'll see why once we get into the meat of the lesson. All right, let me adjust a little bit. Okay. All right, so there are 5 pictures here at the bottom, and they are home, share, happiness, neighborhood, and better. And so in the story, these words were mentioned, and I created a tally or a count of how many times each word was mentioned. All right. So the first word was home, and this is home. So I'm going to circle home. Use my writing tool to circle home. I guess I use a different color. Home, right here. So that's the first word that we were looking for, and this is the picture. I just blew it up. So the word home was mentioned 2 times in our News to You story, Sharing Happiness. And so here I made a tens frame just to keep the data a little organized. The kids are used to, excuse me, they are familiar with tens frames and how we use them and the way that we count. So when you count in a tens frame, you always count from left to right. And so because there were 2 times that the word home was mentioned, I put 2 in our tens frames. So you can pause the video here. You can use the 10 frame that is on the screen or the one that you might have printed, and have your kiddos touch and count. You can touch and count with them depending on their ability. You know your child, you might have to use some hand over hand assistance, but literally all you have to do is count 1, 2, and then we stop and you say how many? 2. Let's count again. 1, 2. Stop. How many homes? 2. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to drag these images onto our worksheet. You can use a writing tool, like how we did for a previous graphing lesson, and you can color in 2 spaces. If you do not have a writing tool with you, you can use a sticker, a marker, and easily just draw a dot. Something just that represents those 2. But I, for the purpose of this lesson, am going to drag 1 and 2. So we saw the word home 2 times on our story. All right, now I'm going to go to the next page of my flip chart. All right, so the next word that we're working on is share. And remember, we saw home 1, 2 times. So share is the word that we are looking at now. Share. So I'm going to circle share. All right. So this again, I just blew up the picture so that it's a little easier to see. So share was in our story one time. One time. And so I put that one picture, only one, in my tense frame. So again, if you've printed the document, you can have your kiddo touch and count. Or if you're using the video, you can just pause the video and have them touch the screen. So this is one. How many did we count? Only one. So I'm going to move my picture and put it on my graph. So now let me erase this. Make my eraser a little bigger. Cool. So now we know that thus far in our story, our first word was home. So home appeared in the story 2 times, 2. And the word share appeared in our story only 1 time. All right, let's go to the next one. Our next word is happiness. I'm going to circle it. Happiness. Okay. All right, happiness. So happiness was in our story 1 time. And there's only one picture in our tense frame. So let's touch and count. 1. How many times did we see the word happiness? 1 time. So I'm going to take my picture and put it on my graph. See, this is the match. I'm going to put it right here at the bottom. We always start at the bottom of vertical graphs. So we saw the word happiness 1 time. So far in our story, we saw the word home 2 times. We saw the word share 1 time. We saw the word happiness 1 time. And so share and happiness have the same number, 1. Home appeared more than share and happiness because we saw it 2 times. Our next word is neighborhood. So I'm going to circle it on our graph. Neighborhood. All right, and neighborhood was in our story only 1 time. So let's touch and count. Here we go. 1. So how many times did we see the word neighborhood? 1 time. So I'm going to take my neighborhood, put it on my graph. Let me erase. Okay. So share, happiness, and neighborhood were all in our story 1 time. So thus far, home was in our story more than those other 3 words. This is more in sign language, more. All right. And our last one is better, better, better. All right. And here is better. It's blown up just so that you can see it for visual purposes. All right, so let's look at our 10 frame. So let's say this number wasn't even there. Let's look at our 10 frame and let's count the pictures that are in our 10 frame. You're going to touch and count with me. 1, 2. We saw the word better 2 times in our story. And so that is why the number 2 is here. All right, so I'm going to, remember we start from the left and we go to the right. So I'm going to take my picture and put it on my graph. Take my second picture and put it on my graph. All right, so let's look at this graph. Let's look at it. So let me cover this up so that it doesn't trick our brains. Make it a different color. All right. So if we look at this graph right here, we know that we have our 5 pictures at the bottom, and these are the words that we were looking for in our story. So our first word was home, and we said that we saw the word home 2 times. 2 times. And the word share, we only saw 1 time. The word happiness, we only saw 1 time. The word neighborhood, we only saw 1 time. And our last word was better. And we saw the word better 2 times. 2 times. All right, so now we're going to answer some questions based on our graph. So before you go to the question aspect of this activity, please make sure that your graph looks like mine if you have printed the document. And parents, even if you didn't print the document, please review this with them to try to see if they understand the concept and that they have the same answers as well. Okie dokie. So our first question says, which word had the most? Which word had the most? And so most is the biggest amount. Was it home, share, happiness, neighborhood, or better? So here I have the graph, and I can make it bigger if need be and move this bad boy over. So here's the graph. Which word had the most? So let's look at home. Home had 2. So I'm going to write a 2, make that a little smaller. Just to keep it a little organized for you guys, I'm going to write a 2 underneath home. All right. Share had 1. I'm going to write a 1. Happiness had 1. How many did neighborhood have? Neighborhood had 1 as well too. All right, and what about better? How many times was the word better in our story? 2, very good. 2 times. All right. So if I look at these numbers, I know that 2 is bigger than 1. If I have 2, I have more. But the word home and better both have 2. So I'm just going to circle both of them. I'm going to take my writing tool, circle home, and circle better. So home and better, those are the 2 words that had the most. All right, let's go to the next question. All right, the next question says, which word had the least? Which word had the least? I'm going to move this over and make this bigger. All right, so remember our question is, which word had the least? And so we just found these numbers on our previous question. So the least means the smallest amount. Small, 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 poquito. All right. And so we know that home had 2. Share had 1. Happiness had 1, neighborhood had 1, and better had 2. So we know that 1 is our smallest number, and 3 pictures had the same number. So all we have to do is circle all 3 pictures. I'm going to circle share, happiness, and neighborhood. All right, question number 3. So I'm just going to move this over, make this bigger. All right, so our question says, were any numbers the same? Yes or no? So if we go back to this page, we knew that home and better had 2, and then share, happiness, and neighborhood had 1. So are these the same? Yes. And are these the same as well? Yes. And this is yes in sign language. So we're going to circle yes. Awesome. All right. So remember, what did we do today? We graphed. And we had to determine how many times these words at the bottom of our graph were in our story. So we saw that the word home was in our story 2 times. The word share was in our story 1 time. The word happiness was in our story 1 time. The word neighborhood was in our story 1 time. And the word better was in our story 2 times. And so we found out that the words home and better had the most, they had more, and that share, happiness, and neighborhood had the smallest or the least amount. And from that information, we were able to determine that home and better had the same number, and that share, happiness, and neighborhood also had the same number. All right, and that is the end of our graphing lesson. All right, and we will do another graphing lesson next week, and that will wrap up our graphing unit. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and please, please, please stay safe at home. Bye, guys.